If I can ask the final 5 panelists to please join me on the stage, and I'll introduce the panel. So we wanted to wrap up the sort of your presentations today. We really wanted to look and talk about the future of public safety and GIS. So I'm delighted to have 5 panelists join me. We're going to ask each of them to talk one at a time, give them about 5 minutes to make their presentation on how they think the future of public safety and GIS will evolve. Then, as time permits, we'll move into a panel discussion. So let me start by introducing all 5 of our panelists. So first starting with Brian Fontes, who currently serves as the Chief Executive of the National Emergency Number Association, a position he's held since 2008. And as CEO, he is responsible for all aspects of the association, and his primary objectives are to ensure that Americans have access to reliable 911 service. Brian's going to be followed by Mr. Richard Reed, who's the Chief Network Management and Operations Officer for the FirstNet Authority. And Rich brings more than 30 years of government and industry experience in emergency communications. And in 2018, Mr. Reed became the Chief Network Management and Operations Officer of the nationwide public service broadband network, that's NPSBN, and oversees the FirstNet core, the radio access network, and the network's deployment operations and evolution. Following Rich, Chief Rob Brown Jr., who serves as the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Strategy Officer of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and he also serves as the Executive Vice President of the IAFC Global Public Safety Solutions, where he particularly heads the efforts in the Middle East. Rob will be followed by Jason Jackson, who leads the emergency management for Walmart. And again, we're delighted to have the private sector participating. Jason's responsible for global crisis management for the Fortune 1, supporting over 2.3 million associates, 350 plus million customers a week, over 12,000 physical locations operating in 27 countries across more than 60 banners, e-commerce operations, and the supporting infrastructure. And then to close us out, Kevin Wright is a Senior Solutions Architect at the US Department of Homeland Security's Office of the Chief Readiness Support Officer. And if you happen to see a man riding a scooter through San Diego wearing a seat, it's probably Kevin. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to make his introductory remarks.
Thank you very much. All of us on this panel have the wonderful task of telling you everything we know in 5 minutes or less. So I'm going to boil this down to 3 simple things. What is NENA? How many of you are involved in 911? Show of hands. Okay, very good, thank you. NENA, the 911 Association, is the standards and policy, advocacy and education organization for emergency calling in North America and beyond. NENA is the technical and operational standards governing unit for 911 and next generation 911. And this works across the United States and elsewhere in the world. And NENA is the only open standards organization dedicated to 911 and emergency calling issues. Now, there are about 97 other things that NENA is involved in, but in the interest of that time of 5 minutes, I'm going to skip over those other 97 elements. The second thing I want to talk to you about is transitioning 911 into really the 21st century. The traditional analog voice-centric 911 system is no longer able to support modern needs, including multimedia and better location handling. Increased needs for access to additional data is just simply a requirement, and we need that network to provide that data information. Interoperability needs exist like they've never existed before, and it requires the ability to create a flexible 911 system. NENA has developed next generation 911 specifications that include secure, robust emergency service IP networks, or ESI nets, as some of you may know. Next Generation 911, I'll boil down this 400-plus page document into a few bullet points. It's an all IP and SIP system. Location handling, GIS, is integrated throughout this ESI net. Support of many call types is critical to Next Generation 911, including multimedia. Legacy gateways exist for the transitional elements to move from legacy 911 into Next Generation 911. Again, interoperability between localities, states, and nations is an important factor of Next Generation 911. Canada, our neighbors to the north, have utilized the I3 standard for their Next Generation 911 deployment nationwide. In the United States, we have 20-plus states in various stages from RFPs to deployment of Next Generation 911, and that number is growing. We work with our neighbors and friends in Latin America to talk about their Next Generation 911 efforts. And for those who are from Europe, we have been very much involved in the NG112 development for quite a while. So that gives you a little bit of background in terms of what NENA's efforts are to move 911 into the 21st century. The third point that I want to talk about is location. Location is very important for obvious reasons. In today's world, certainly in this country and elsewhere in the world, we have exceeded 100% saturation by mobile devices. It's only normal that we would have the overwhelming majority of 911 calls originating from wireless devices. Today, in the US, it's approximately 80% of 911 calls coming from mobile devices. The FCC has been involved for many years in trying to improve location accuracy, and for those who have been following it for the many years that the FCC has been engaged, we have moved from outdoor location accuracy to outdoor and indoor location accuracy requirements, as well as the Z-axis. And a lot of work has been done and continues to be done in both of the regulatory context as well as looking at these mobility platforms in moving location accuracy to 911 with a greater degree of focus or of accuracy. For those who are familiar, there's been announcements both by our Android and our iOS platform providers to help provide the intelligence in their handsets and married to networks and other providers to enable improved location accuracy, whether over-the-top applications are integrated into the computer-aided dispatch systems to provide that improved location to those 911 professionals answering the 911 calls. The next thing I want to talk about is the improvement of the NENA PSAP registry. And it's simply called the Enhanced. I always have to read this because I flip the letters. It's probably my dyslexia or something. The Emergency PSAP or Enhanced PSAP registry and census. And this is important because the 911 registry or PSAP registry is a means to enable 911 centers and other approved entities to move call information from one 911 center to another 911 center when there is no readily available information regarding that next 911 center. In short, this effort is to move NENA's PSAP registry into a modern ArcGIS online platform. We're pleased to be working with our partners who help support this, Uber, the 911 office, and Geocom in developing this enhanced PSAP registry and census. All of these developments, if you will, are important and are related to improving the location accuracies associated with 911. There are many other areas of interest here that I will not have the opportunity to go through in this initial 5-minute time frame. But I hope that for those who are here on Tuesday, or will be here on Tuesday, you will hear additional information about the PSAP Enhanced Registry and Census, and begin to gain a deeper understanding of the work that's being done in that area. Thank you very much.
Ryan, thank you. Rich.
So good afternoon. Test 1, 2. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Rich Reed. I'm with FirstNet. I'm the Chief Network Management and Operations Officer at FirstNet. I've been with them from really the inception. I supported FirstNet in the earliest stages from my position at DHS. Then I became the Director of State Plans, the Chief Customer Officer, and now the role I'm in now. And essentially my job is to oversee the deployment of the network, both core and RAN. And I could not be happier to be here with you today to give you a quick update and share with you where we are currently in the deployment and talk about our vision over the next couple of years for improving the network. I want to thank John for hosting this panel. Appreciate everyone participating. I also want to thank Mike King from Esri and the entire Esri staff for having such a great event. So where are we today? We have 600,000 plus connections. All this information on this slide is publicly available, and it's based on the March timeframe. So we have 600,000 users across 7,250 agencies across 600 plus cellular markets. We're about halfway through the Band 14 deployment. We have 75 dedicated deployable assets for public safety. That's a really unique differentiator for FirstNet. Just over the 4th of July holiday, we had 16 planned events where deployables were out supporting public safety and 1 emergency response event just for that one day. Based on a Ookla speed test that was just released, a report, we're 25% faster than any other commercial network that's available. I can tell you that that's low. That's based on a lot of devices that don't take full advantage of our band as well as the carrier aggregation settings that we can use, but 25% faster than any other of our competitors, pretty good. We aren't standing with the current deployment. We're not going to fall back on our heels and just say that building out this network's good enough. We're already looking at investment. I was in a session this morning where Jack Dangermond said that Esri rolls 30% of their net proceeds back into R&D. FirstNet is by law, by statute, required to invest 100% of the proceeds back into the network. So we need to make sure that we have a really defined, defendable, structured way to reinvest in the network. And we're already looking into that, even though we haven't completed the radio access network build. It's still going to be public safety centric. It's still going to be data driven, just like all of the other consultative and state planning events that we've done. It's going to be based on public need. We're going to look at all kinds of data sets, GIS data sets, public safety data sets, federal data sets, to make sure that we're making the most impact with the investment resources and decisions we're making. We're going to look at that through 6 sort of focused domains. And I'll go into to one of them here in just a second in terms of just how we plan on doing this. Situational awareness is one of the strategic domains we're looking to make investment in. We want to make sure that practitioners that are affecting that tactical decision-making on the ground have all of the information and all the data sets they need to make the most timely and relevant decision based on a whole host of data sets that are out there. We intend to leverage all of the fixed, deployable, and terrestrial assets to ensure that public safety has access to all of the wealth of information that currently resides in GIS form and other forms so that they can better protect themselves and better protect populations and execute their life-saving mission. How many people heard IoT? We like to talk about this in the terms of the Internet of life-saving things. Back in the old days, police officers just went out with a firearm, a land mobile radio, and a badge, and they policed. Firefighters were focused on putting water at the base of the fire, putting out fires. Today, they have a host of information that's available to them, generally in a strategic or planning set. But when it comes time to actually execute those decisions tactically, the network has failed them, and they've failed to be able to truly operationalize GIS information in its purest sense. FirstNet hopes to improve that reliability. We're going to deliver a network that not only allows public safety to better make decisions tactically on the ground, but also they're going to be a series of sensors that are going to help command and control authorities make better strategic decisions. So the use of augmented reality, virtual reality, all of the wearable sensors will make the job of doing first responders work more effective. So, as we're all aware, we do a good job at knowing where we are in relation to other things on the XY axis. FirstNet's committed to delivering a Z-axis solution. So we want to be able to ensure that first responders know where you are vertically. And the challenge for this group is to help us better map, provide data and infrastructure so that once that technical solution is available to public safety, they actually have the information they can use to save lives. Our partners at PSER are currently out doing a lot of grant work, and one of the grants they've actually awarded is for GIS mapping, LiDAR mapping, and the ability to really document the infrastructure inside a facility. That's going to be very important once we get that Z-axis technology in place. So in closing, FirstNet's committed to partnering with all of you, and we're going to deliver you a secure, reliable, resilient connection so that you can take advantage of all the wealth of data that's available in GIS format and other formats. So appreciate being here, appreciate taking the time. I went a little over, but I tried to get through it quickly. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rich. We'll turn it over now to Rob.
Thank you, John. When John introduced me, he talked about one of my titles being the Chief Strategy Officer. I guarantee you that anybody that knew me when I entered on duty in the fire service in 1981 would say strategy was not part of anything that I ever thought about. My professors at the University of Missouri would also say that strategy was never in my vocabulary as I navigated my way through the college. See what others can't. That's kind of the theme here. And we've been asked to talk about GIS and its future in public safety. And when I started in 1981, we were essentially blind in a lot of ways. I remember as a firefighter, when I first started, a lot of times we didn't have 3- and 4-person companies. We had one person driving the apparatus, and volunteers would meet us at the scene. How do we look at a map book and drive? We didn't. We looked for water on the street as someone turned the corner, because fire trucks leaked back then, so technology wasn't so good in the tank industry either. So we'd see the water trail, and we'd know to turn there, or someone would leave out a flare. We didn't know about response times. We did the best we could. Our radio systems, things such as FirstNet, weren't even thought of back then. I got in the fire service because my father died of a sudden heart attack when I was 9 years old, and our community was just in the process of getting paramedics. So response times are very, very important to me. And for the 25 years I was a chief officer, I focused on that. And I looked at performance benchmarks, and we couldn't get the data. We had multiple different ways of collecting data, and we could never put it together. As I started growing through in the fire service, one day I was introduced to GIS. And I thought, well, it's just a fancy way to print a map and put it on the wall. And that's kind of what we started to use it for. And then we had people that were professionals in GIS and folks from Esri talk to us about harnessing the power of GIS and what that could really mean for the fire service. We could integrate so many of our things, not just our performance, but our response data. We could go back and look at trends. We could essentially explore anything that we needed to. And many of our cities and counties already had GIS that we're using as a planning and zoning tool. Most of us fire chiefs said, what do we need with a planning and zoning tool? So when I look at the future of GIS, I look at what we're doing now. And in the International Association of Fire Chiefs in general, we have worked with Esri and the National Alliance of Public Safety GIS Foundation to create applications that that harness the power of GIS and put tools in the hands of first responders to be able to respond to disasters and collect information. We've been able to create a portal so that fire chiefs can go inside and pull their data, manipulate their data, and look at the trends and the types of information that they may need. We've been able to reach out to so many different partners and integrate the technologies so that we can see everything on a dashboard. People like to be successful. If we put a dashboard up in a fire station that shows what their performance is on response times, they have 60 seconds to get out the door. They have 4 minutes to get there in 90% of the time. If that's up there so they can visually see it, they're going to strive to achieve that. Management isn't about, at the end of the month, coming to the fire station and saying, you failed to get out on time. You failed to meet your response criteria. Why not have something visual right there for them to see it so they can improve and get better? That's what we're working for. That's the future. Recently, in a partnership with Esri and Javari, WebEOC folks, we've created the National Mutual Aid System. This system allows us to see real time where resources are and deploy those resources. Back when I was a task force leader for Missouri Task Force 1, our folks got deployed to Hurricane Katrina. They were staged in the Memphis area. Other resources would pass them on the way to the disaster because there was no way for the people that were making the decisions to see where those resources were. Now we have the ability to harness the power of GIS through the power of WebEOC and others, and to be able to pull that together and give incident commanders tools that they need so that they can make better decisions. Decisions are made by those who show up. I thank you today for showing up. We have great panelists here. We're going to have time for questions and answers. I thank you very much.
Good afternoon, I'm Jason Jackson. I work for Walmart. I run their emergency management program. Really quickly, how many of you are in law enforcement? Fire service? EMS? Same. Emergency management? Private sector? Any NGOs? You didn't know that you were going to get tested, did you? So here's a funny thing. So I came out of the fire service and state police, and when I was recruited to Walmart, I had to sit down with my best friend and his wife and explain why I was going to leave the fire service and the police department to go to Walmart Global Security. And my best friend's wife couldn't understand why in the world it was that I was going to leave my state police cruiser to go drive that little white car with a yellow light on top in the Walmart parking lot. The reality is that most people think about their local Walmart store when we talk about Walmart, or when you kind of pose that iconic brand that might be in your mind, the place that you shop, you kind of just immediately bring it to where you go and the things that go into it. The reality is, and the slide that's up on the screen, and I use this just as an example, but within Walmart, we are a much broader company than most people think about. Yes, we're Fortune 1, and yes, we have large scale, and you know that our stores are everywhere, but it's not just the Walmart stores, it's also Sam's Club and Bonobos and Moose Jaw and Eloquii and a whole bunch of other brands. And then as we move globally, a whole bunch of brands around the globe as well. With a lot of associates that work for us, with a lot of locations around the US and around the world, and all of the supporting infrastructure that lives underneath it. And that's what is at the very bottom, and that's where I really want you to concentrate for just a second. Because when we talk about community lifelines, the community being resilient, the Walmart, the Lowe's, the Home Depot, the Target, the regional grocer, those people within your own communities are the people that have these same type of infrastructures underneath. And whether they're providing health and wellness, and they have a pharmacy like a CVS or a Walgreens or a Walmart, or they're providing supply chain, or they're providing food and water. These are places within your communities that are very important to be communicating with. Now, we all deal with emergencies and crises the same that you do, and oftentimes you are the first responder into those types of things, but immediately we are dealing with it as well. And whether it's things like you see that are up on the screen here, or it's large-scale disasters, or it's public health emergencies, or it's that isolated criminal event, that active shooter, or whatever else it might be, there is a private sector response to that just as much as there is a public sector response to it. For our organization, we put our associates number one because they're a priority as we're reaching out, trying to ensure that everyone's okay. It was the first order of business in the Ridgecrest earthquake here just the last few days. Are our associates okay? Where are they at? Do they need anything? What is the impact to them and their families? And right behind that becomes the operational capabilities and what's happening within our operations. Is the store up and running? Is the distribution center up and running? Is the supply chain severed? What do we need to provide to get that facility back up and running so that we can do number three, which is support the community? And that comes in, I could tell you stories, a lot of stories for hours probably, about how that actually manifests. And whether that's supporting local law enforcement, fire service, emergency management, EMS, or whoever else might be of in need that is supporting the community and getting the community back up and running, or supporting or returning residents post an evacuation, or it's a safe haven. If you go to Chico, California here at the Paradise Fire, you saw a safe haven that emerged, which is also an interesting circumstance that we don't have time for as that played out. But even within that, it becomes how do we work together to support the community? Within that, we have a framework and a structure that we leverage within our company. From business continuity and crisis planning all the way through preparedness to response to recovery, all of that sits on a foundation of data, technology, and talent, and making sure that we have the right things in place so that we can effect the most efficient and effective response, the same way that a lot of you think about your own organizations. Now, with the final few seconds that I have here, we are leveraging Esri as well. And we are new users to this space here within the last year, but already in the way that we communicate out from a visualization and contextualization, just the short strides that we've made have made a huge difference in the way that we do our business because of not only how do we track incidents and assets, but how do we communicate out information. One of the things we've done for a long time is provided a GeoRSS feed of all of our open and closed statuses to government responders. And by consumption of that, you immediately know is in the hurricane, is the Walmart open or closed? Is their pharmacy up or down? What kind of supply do they have that's available to me to be used as a resource? And being able to communicate that. And I know that my partners to the left and the right across the retail sector do a lot of the same thing. And we encourage each other to make sure that we are sharing information bilaterally back and forth with NGOs, governmental organizations at all levels, so that we can have a greater common operating picture of what's occurring. I know there's going to be time for questions on the back end of this, but just know, and I encourage you strongly, engage with your local private sector partners and help drive them to the table in terms of what it is that you need to make your communities more resilient. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all for having me out here today. I want to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about what DHS from the headquarter perspective is doing with spatial analysis, GIS, and through something that we call the DHS Cube. So in title, I am a solutions architect, but honestly, I'm unapologetically a GIS geek at heart and a visualization guy, so I'd like to show you a little bit about what we do through some visualizations that I like to put together. So as I'm sure all of you guys are aware, or at least most of you should be, Department of Homeland Security was put together from a bunch of agencies across the federal government in 2002, pulled those all together to form the components that now make up what we call the Department of Homeland Security. And when we stood that up at the time, we also stood up my organization, my component, the headquarters component. Our primary, we've got quite a few missions, but two of those are to support the secretary. We provide data analytics support to the secretary. We provide information and reports and so on. But more importantly to me, and especially after hearing my colleagues from CBP, just how important it is to really provide mission support to those components. We provide things like contract support. Simple, but allows them to do their job. Personnel support. We also provide, probably most importantly, financial support. So that's in sort of the steady state aspect, but what happens during an emergency like, say, a hurricane or, God forbid, in Southern California, an earthquake, right? the secretary is going to need some information. He'll be asking, or the secretary and the advisors will be asking questions like, hey, are the components able to continue their mission, and do they need some type of support from us to continue to do their mission the way that they do? And so when those questions came early on, when I got started in doing this, we had to do the dreaded data call. Nobody liked to hear that term, but we reached out to the components and said, hey, can you tell us how you guys are doing? And mind you, they're trying to manage a hurricane or an earthquake or something like that, and we're taking valuable time from them. But they managed to get us data. We would take that data in all the various formats that it came in and analyze that data using Esri technology, including ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Pro. And we would put together some type of report with great maps and so on that we'd hand over to the secretary and the advisors. The problem with that, it took time. Time is something that neither the secretary nor, more importantly, in my opinion, the components have. So we recognized right away that we had to do something better and faster than that. So in a very unoriginal idea, we came up with the idea of a data warehouse, right? So that's where the idea of the DHS Cube was born. So the DHS Cube, what we do is we reach out to each of the components and say, hey, we need information about your buildings, your land, your structures, your assets, motor vehicles, aviation assets, and so on. That's just scratching the surface. Personnel information is an awful lot of information that we gather there. And we do that in a steady state and bring that into one data warehouse. Now that enables us to have this in one place and more quickly respond to those questions that come out. But it's not just about data. Having data is great, but we wanted to extend the capability of the cube, and so recently we've been focusing very heavily on visualization and analytics. And we do that through the prepackaged widget tools that are available through Esri, whether it's KPIs or maps or graphs or something like that. And we drop those widgets that are attached to our data into applications that are helping to answer specific questions, even dashboards that ultimately can go back to giving the secretary and the advisors that information that they need. So this can't be done without great technology, right? And through the enterprise-wide license agreement that DHS has with Esri, we're able to access, I venture to say we're using if not most, a darn good portion of all of Esri's technology. And I geek out on this stuff, so excuse me. We're using ArcGIS Enterprise, stuff like ArcGIS Server to reach into the Oracle databases and pull the information out. And then ArcGIS Portal to create services from that can be consumed by these widgets that we can then put into applications. And we also need to visualize that, so we have stood up an ArcGIS Online environment as well, where we're using things like Web App Builder. We have a great tool that's called GeoExplorer that allows us to actually look at all the information that's been shared and explore that information. Also, if you haven't seen it yet, and very recently we started using business and community analysts, which are a very similar product, to produce some really impressive infographics that can very quickly convey the status at any given time. So the last thing, the missing link for us was something that I'm really happy to see where Esri has gone with this, allowing us to, at DHS, resiliency is key. So we wanted to ensure that we were able to back up and sync the data from our ArcGIS Portal, enterprise environment, including Portal, to our ArcGIS Online environment. And I've got my engineer here today who stood that up for us recently, and we're just getting rolling on that. What does this all mean, though? What this means, and this is the part that I'm actually really passionate about, is that, yes, we can provide more quickly the information to the secretary and all the advisors. But most importantly, we're able to free up time for our brothers and sisters in the component world to actually do the amazing work that they're doing. And I don't know about you guys, but I was really struck by what I heard from CBP. So it actually kind of gave me a little further gas to do our job better so that these folks in the field won't feel as if they have a burden from headquarters anymore. So just last couple things I wanted to show you is this is just a screenshot of our Geo Explorer tool. The great thing about this that I find exciting is that we can create something like this without any coding. Looks great, works well, no coding. And then this, I mentioned something about the interactive reporting that we can create. This is just a screenshot of what we were doing with the community analyst and business analyst infographics tool. So with that, I encourage you guys, if you want to, reach out to me at some point. I'd be happy to talk to you and look forward to taking any questions. So thank you.
Great.
I need to give this to you. You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
So we did want to make this a panel, so I would like to take a little bit more time to ask if there are any questions from the audience. I mean, we have five very senior professionals here who would like to take your questions on, what is the future of GIS and public safety? We have a question at the back.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Quick question for Mr. Reed. I represent some oil and gas pipeline companies across the Southwest who are installing fiber optic cables in parallel to their oil and gas pipelines. And these are running through all the western Texas counties, et cetera. We're putting them in the ground to monitor leak detection and incursion from ranchers and other folks across the pipeline for a safety reason. There's 45 other open channels on those fiber optic cables for comms out in the West. Is FirstNet somebody who would use those communications lines? I mean, there's no real commercial practice out there in these counties. There's not a lot of people, but there are a lot of public safety and Border Patrol and DEA and other law enforcement officials working out there.
So it's a great question, and we are absolutely looking at infrastructure that's available to speed the deployment or lower the cost of deployment. So we would want you to engage with our partner at AT&T and bring that opportunity to them. If you have a problem getting in contact with AT&T, please reach out to me and I'll help broker that discussion. But absolutely, the idea of providing communications in rural America is a focus for FirstNet. Life safety issues, improvements there. My question back to you, do you still have the mic? All right, along with the fiber optics, do you have power associated with it? Okay.
We're running 1,000-mile pipelines. We've got all the monitoring systems to shut them off so there's power. I mean, we can put anything we want attached to the cable just like anybody else.
We'd love to have that dialogue. Anything that would improve coverage in rural America is something that we're very interested in having a dialogue about.
Several $100 million per pipeline of investment. And, obviously we have a life safety and a leak detection purpose, but it's all running out in places where there isn't a lot of other infrastructure.
It's understood. And anywhere that there's infrastructure right-of-ways, things that, again, will help us speed deployment or lower the cost of deployment, we would love to have a dialogue about.
Great, thank you. Do you want to carry on, or do we have any other
We can
any other
talk after.
questions? I would actually like to pick up on with Jason. You said we need to come together to support the community, and you didn't have time to expand on that. What advice do you have for the private and the public sector as to how we can better come together in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, 5 minutes wasn't very long, really, to do that. A couple things. Number one, it does start with relationships. So we'll pull back out of technology just a second. It starts with relationships. And so when I was, a captain or a chief, and it was also when I was at the police department, it starts as a one-to-one relationship with the business owners. And you have a complete spectrum of who wants to engage with you and who doesn't want to engage with you. But if you can solve for 60, 70, 80% of your community, you're that much further along. I think, one of the things, just in talking with the team, who says you can't do a survey 1, 2, 3 open online survey and right before a major disaster that's impending that you know about, turn around and update all of your business profiles so that you have the latest manager's name and number and everything else. And so even leveraging ArcGIS and Survey 1, 2, 3 as a tool to reach out to communities and pull that information in quickly. But at the end of the day, the reason the relationship's important because you can figure out, one, What is that data sharing that we can share back and forth? For larger companies, I mean, and like Walmart as an example, I mean, there is information sharing that we can send things back and forth. For smaller companies, they may or may not have that available to them. But having that relationship and having that conversation is where all of that starts, and whether it's available to you or not. The second piece that comes right behind that is the understanding of each individual business within your community of what they might be able to provide that you just never knew about. Right, and whether it's major assets like tractors or supplies or things, or it's food and water. I can tell you just from being there for a number of disasters, when you have a police officer or a firefighter that has been working a hurricane for 5-6 days straight, long days, a fresh pair of underwear and socks go a long way. Who are you going to go to get that, right? And so that's why those relationships are important. But anything that we can do as we continue to move into the future in creating automated feeds so that it's not always the phone call that you have to make, but you reduce that communication by having that information available to you, it's going to benefit the community.
Great. Time for one more question if there is one from the audience. Don't worry, the bar won't open without you. Yeah, we have a question down the front.
For Brian, for our next-gen PSAP folks that are here in the room, now that the GIS standard is developed, is there any one PSAP that you know of that's starting to implement GIS routing?
I'm trying to recall right off the top of my head. I know that in Vermont, for an example, there were, when a hurricane went through the area, they were able to move 911 calls to, not a lot of PSAPs in Vermont, but they would be able to move the calls from one PSAP that would have originally received a 911 call to others. There are some in the audience here that may have knowledge that I don't in terms of using GIS to route 911 calls, but that is clearly one of the benefits of moving forward with Next Generation 911.
And we appreciate your efforts with that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for the question. Please join me in thanking the panelists for their efforts, their hard work, and offering their thoughts.